Hey guys, okay, so now I'm going to start the rhetorical analysis walkthrough video where I kind of walk you through each step of how to do it. And as a reminder, we'll be using the Reading Strategies and Rhetorical Analysis booklet. You can find it right here in the modules. It's under Module 7. It's this piece of course material. And the video lectures that I'm working on uploading are here as well. So this is for reading strategies. This is the PowerPoint from before, writing a rhetorical analysis. So now let's go, and we're going to start going over here. I'm on a different page than I need to be for this because I was looking at something else. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to be using the booklet for this rather than a PowerPoint because it's not convenient to copy and paste an entire article into PowerPoint. So we're just going to go ahead and go through this. So in the first two parts of the booklet, you learned about reading strategies and an overview of the rhetorical analysis mode. And this is what we've covered in the PowerPoints as well. So in this section, I'm going to walk you through the process of analyzing and writing this type of essay. So the first step, as we talked about, is to read and annotate the essay. So I've put some comments in the margins here. So the article is In the Shadow of COVID-19, Mental Health Help Can't Come Soon Enough. It's an opinion article by David Wenberg and Ezekiel Emanuel, published by CNN Opinion. David Wenberg is the Chief Executive Officer for Quartet Health, a mental health technology and services company. Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel is Vice Provost of Global Initiatives and a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. The opinions expressed in this commentary are their own. So, what I know already, just from reading the title in this little bit, is that more than likely the article is going to be focusing on why mental health should be a priority during the pandemic. So I can tell that from the title. I know it's an opinion or an op-ed, so I know that the purpose is probably going to be persuasive. They normally are. It's published by CNN, so then I know that it's more than likely going to be related to current events or news. And this is called a byline, where it gives you some biographical information about the authors. So this tells me important information about the individuals who are writing the article. I know that both of them are experts in mental health, so this is definitely an appeal to ethos that I want to make note of. So then we'll start reading the article. When the flu pandemic hit the United States in 1918, medical care was a privilege reserved for the elite, but the widespread outbreak of a deadly virus did not adhere to social hierarchies. It highlighted an inadequate system that too few could access. As a result, forward-thinking people built a public health infrastructure from scratch, one which we still see the critical value of today. So this author is starting, or these authors are starting with a hook illustrating a familiar situation from a century ago and highlighting changes that were brought about as a result. So this is good information. This could actually apply to Pathos because it is something that it would be emotionally interesting to the reader. It could apply to Ethos because it's showing their knowledge of historical events. It could also apply to Logos because it's showing a logical response. So any of the three could really appeal here. It's not a clear one or the other, but we could use it in an argument. So more than 100 years later, in the midst of the novel coronavirus pandemic, we face the consequences of another inadequate and inaccessible system, mental health care. The psychological pressures that COVID-19 has brought, isolation and physical distancing, fast rising unemployment and economic loss, have triggered what amounts to a secondary pandemic for millions of Americans. We need a mental health care overhaul. So I'm thinking this is probably the thesis statement. The authors are indicating the weaknesses in our current mental health services, how COVID has made those worse, and end with a claim that we need a mental health overhaul. This will probably be a good quote to use for my paper, particularly for the purpose or in my introduction and my conclusion. Okay, and then help can't come soon enough. According to research published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in April of this year, about 3 times as many of adults have reported psychological distress as in 2018. That same month, texts to the federal government's disaster distress helpline increased by almost 1,000%. So here we have a lot of facts and links illustrating the problem. The data itself is an appeal to Logos, and an attribution to credible authorities is an appeal to Ethos. So we have 2 different appeals here that we could use in our paper. So I definitely want to note this paragraph. As the pandemic has continued, parents, especially mothers, have reported feelings of grief, fear, and loneliness as they balance schooling their children and maintaining full-time jobs. Furthermore, reports of domestic violence and abuse are increasing around the world. The killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others have increased anxiety and depression among the Black community, compounding the experience of trauma and psychological violence caused by systemic racism. So here we have a lot of appeals to pathos because we're describing suffering of many types of individuals. We also have appeals to ethos by using links that support the claim and authority. So for pathos, we have grief, fear, and loneliness, and we have a specific example of balancing schooling their children and maintaining full-time jobs. So this is something that readers might empathize with. Similarly, we have this one here, the increased anxiety and depression among the Black community. Well, those who were victims of or who were involved in the protests might really feel a lot reading this. So this could definitely be an appeal to pathos. So I definitely want to note that. Okay, we must address this massive crisis in mental health. However, to make meaningful changes, we first need to examine the failure of our current system. So this could be a really good quote to include in the introduction or conclusion because it really tells me what the writer hopes I'll do after reading this. He wants me to work, or they want me to work, on improving mental health services. And I also know from this that it's a well-organized piece because he's saying that his first major point is going to be examining the failure of the current system. So the overall structure, the fact that it is very logical, appeals to both ethos and logos. Ethos in that it shows that he knows his writing, he knows his rhetoric, and logos in that it is a logical decision to make. All right, next page. Historically, society has denigrated mental health, perhaps because the condition of the mind seems less real or measurable by established standards. This notion largely segregated mental health from the medical system, undermining our investment in mental health treatment and caregiving to this day. So this could be a couple of things, and it didn't really jump out at me, so I didn't note it, but it could be ethos because he's showing his credibility and knowledge. It could also be logos because he's talking about cause and effect. So then let's look at the next one. Although nearly 1 in 4 American adults experience a mental health condition each year, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, fewer than half get the care they need per Mental Health America. So that's a lot of stats in one little sentence. That is definitely an appeal to logos because we've got 1 in 4 American adults, we've got fewer than half, so we've got some stats there. That's logos, and it either ethos or logos could be here as well because he is relying very heavily on very reputable sources, so that shows his knowledge and his expertise, and the fact that he's making a logical argument and using data and statistics shows logos, so you could make an argument for either there. One reason is that there are not enough providers. In the United States, there were only 34 psychologists for every 100,000 people, according to the American Psychological Association in 2012. There are even fewer psychiatrists, mental health specialists who prescribe medication, just 13 for every 100,000 people in the U.S. as of 2018. So we have the same thing here. We've got a logical argument, we've got a lot of data, we've got a lot of reputable sources. So again, we've got logos and ethos happening here. So for those seeking care, finding the right treatment can feel harrowing. Ooh, we've got an emotional word there with harrowing. All too often, people with insurance are given a 1-800 number on the back of a card to find mental health services only to get the runaround. So that could be an appeal to pathos because it suggests the frustration that many patients feel and that the reader might feel as well. And harrowing is another one because it's a pretty emotional word. So that could be a good thing for me to look at for pathos. State providers lists often include ghost networks, suggesting that providers don't in fact take insurance, have retired, or even died, which confuses and discouraging patients from pursuing resources. This is also with pathos. This is the same thing as above here. So then let's look at this next paragraph. One study found that as of 2017, patients were over 5 times more likely to need to go out of network to receive mental health care. Apparently I went down too far. Than physical health care. It's not hard to imagine the tremendous impact this has on patients' ability to get help. So these are still appeals to logos in particular, and a little bit of pathos in there too, but they didn't really jump out at me as particularly clear ones, so I didn't highlight them, but they could be used. We need a mental health care system fit for the challenges of the 21st century. The question is, how do we build it? Okay, so this is definitely the topic sentence for the next page or point. We've gone from examining the problems in the current system to what do we do about it. Well, we have a nice little call for action here. How do we build it? This is inspirational. I'm feeling like this could be both pathos and logos. So the next one, this first step is to recognize that mental health is a key component of overall health. This begins in the doctor's office, where mental health screening should become as routine as taking blood pressure. Assessing mental health as part of a standard checkup would help primary care physicians proactively identify mental health conditions, the first step for patients to get the care they need. With an understanding of patients' clinical needs and information on providers' clinical expertise, technology can match patients to health care based on their needs and preferences. Some patients may want in-person care, others would opt for home tele-appointments or digital care through a secure app. This structure would begin to make more efficient use of limited specialists and get people to that care more quickly. Using a patient's baseline mental health assessment, mental health providers would be able to set treatment goals and collaborate with the patient's care team, including their primary care doctor. They would be able to track the patient's progress and know whether or not they're getting healthier from treatment. This information would be kept secure, just like with electronic medical record. Sorry, I'm tired. So we've got this big chunk of text here, and I notice that there are not nearly as many links. I mean, in the previous paragraphs, he had 3 or 4 links per paragraph. Now we have like 5 very short paragraphs and 1 link. So this tells me that this is primarily this person's opinion, and they're not relying as heavily on outside sources here, perhaps because there may not be outside sources to support what he's saying. Additionally, it is very logical, though. It is very step 1, step 2, step 3, very cause and effect, very if-then. So it could still be an appeal to logos, but it maybe wouldn't be as strong as some of the others. He was relying very heavily on his own expertise here, and he clearly is very knowledgeable, so perhaps that could also be an appeal to ethos, but I don't really like it as much as I like some other information in this essay, because I don't feel like it's as strong, but it's definitely something that we could use. Still, insights and infrastructure alone won't fix a broken system. To truly support ubiquitous access to care, we need to build a system where providers are paid more to take insurance. In 2007, mental health providers were reimbursed 24% less than primary care physicians. So again, this doesn't really seem to be that important for what I'm wanting. And admittedly, I'm now starting to feel like this article isn't written for me anymore. Like it was written for individuals back up there when we were using Pathos, but now we're speaking to insurance providers who probably would understand this, but I'm not an insurance provider. So let's go to this next one. It's no coincidence that during the same year, patients found it increasingly difficult to find providers who took their insurance. Ooh, here, maybe that's Pathos. Because of low reimbursement rates, it can be more lucrative for a mental health provider to work directly with patients who can afford to pay out of pocket than work with insurers. To address this disparity, health insurance companies need to pay providers more to help patients get healthy. Through the same technology used to measure patients' health and match them with the right care, insurers can begin to learn about the quality of care a provider delivers. In the immediate term, health insurance companies can use aggregate, non-identifiable patient data to pay providers more money for delivering great care. Over the long term, they will save money. Studies show that improving patients' access to mental health care reduces overall costs for health care plans, especially around chronic physical conditions. So, as I said here, the author seems to be speaking to a different author. Now he's focusing on insurance providers. This makes me wonder if I really need to assess my audience. We do have this bit of pathos here. Patients found it increasingly difficult to find providers who took their insurance. We have this logical argument about how health insurance companies can save money and reduce overall costs. And we have this appeal to, which would be logos, and we have this studies show, which could be logos or ethos. I've only got a few seconds left on this. So then we have this return to the conclusion and what we want it to do. Now we need the courage to act. We have the capabilities. So this again is pathos. It's inspirational. It's also logical, so it could be logos. So I'm going to stop this here before I time out at 15 minutes, and then we will continue with pre-writing in the next steps.